Welcome to Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg. We're here to explore the imposter syndrome that haunts creatives, delving into how it affects their lives and work. Join us as we chat with authors and artists about creativity, self-doubt, featuring imposter characters in their stories, and the occasional imposter who pops up in their day-to-day lives.
Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Chelsea Hofmann and Olivia Wallace to the show. Chelsea is the creator of the Thriller Book Babe Instagram account, host of the International Thrillers by the Bookclub, and co-host of the Thrillers by the Bookclub podcast. She loves thrillers, mysteries, and crime fiction, and when she's not reading, you can find her working in college admissions for her day job. Olivia is an aspiring to be published author, book reviewer, and co-host of the Thrillers by the Bookclub podcast. She loves all things thrillers, chillers, and mysteries, and is in training to become a certified book coach. When she's not daydreaming about juicy plot twists, she loves to travel. She lives in Phoenix with her husband and her dog, Ellie. Ladies, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you.
Welcome!
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
This is really exciting, yes. And Greg and I were talking before. I'm totally going to steal your line, Greg. We are the imposters in this equation.
Yeah.
Like, we've had this podcast for like a hot 2 minutes, and we learned it from watching you. But, really, it's so great to have you both here because you have so many perspectives into books, authors, writing, publishing, and you do so much for books and authors and book clubs. So
if it makes you feel better, we have no idea what we're doing in any way.
Yep. Nope. Every time it's 100% like, hope this is right.
Okay.
Well, you're in the right place.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we're all doing the same thing and we're all doing pretty well. So good. Okay. This is great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, welcome. I was going to ask you for the next, hour or so just to tell us everything that we're doing wrong, but I guess we'll just kind of find our way together, which is even more fun.
Yeah, we wouldn't know.
Okay.
There's no possible way for us to know that. It's just like we just show up and we're like, what should we talk about? And then we just keep talking until the episode's done.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, pretty much.
Well, you've managed, from where we're sitting, you've managed to fake it until you have certainly made it. So you guys are in a very enviable position, I guess, in that way. So it's interesting to hear that you also kind of feel like you're just feeling your way around in the dark, as we, I guess, all are.
Yes. I love that you said that because fake it till you make it is my literal life motto. Since I was like, I have to say in high school, like I always remind myself, nobody knows what you're thinking and how you're feeling. And so whatever you do, they believe it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've like stuck with for so long because nobody will ever be able to tell how you feel, what you're thinking, what your fears are. It's just, they just see what's on the outside. So looks matter. If you take anything away from this, it's that looks matter.
There we go. I think we've got our episode title right there.
Yeah,
there it is.
It's perfect.
I'm writing it down right now.
Ironic for the podcast that doesn't do video for us to have that.
Yes,
but how much, it's just an added layer of intrigue as well that will just kind of like fold into the whole operation. Listeners will love it.
Well,
yeah.
Fake it till you make it is such a great like jumping off point because I think it's been maybe my unofficial motto, like official or unofficial, it doesn't really matter. It's like definitely been a crutch for me in my life in a lot of ways when I felt like really deep imposter syndrome. It's like kind of like the way I'll talk myself out of it. And, definitely for writing and being an author, but I'm saying this, Chelsea, because I know you're a relatively new mom. I felt like as soon as my son came into the world 2 years ago, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like this is the highest degree of fake it till I make it, imposter syndrome, all wrapped into one. And I wonder if you've had that experience yet.
Thank the Lord that there's Google. I'm going to be honest because I have never once in my life, like I spend hours Googling, like, should poop look this color? Let's find out. Like, who does that? Who cares? That's so disgusting. It's like, what? But imagine you don't have the internet. I 100% agree. I know the first time I held a baby was my own baby. So that should tell you a lot about, I've never once touched a baby because I'm not a baby person. I'm like, we have nothing in common. I don't know what to talk about with you. you have no hobbies or interests. Like, what? It's just very awkward. So then I had a baby, and I'm like, so, like, what do we do? And then the internet said, hey, this is how you keep it alive. And then I did that thing, and she's still alive. So I'm like, yes, because I totally understand. It is a huge life change to go, like, keeping a plant alive is not the same at all. I will say, or even a pet. And I had a cat for a week and I returned it. So again, it was not for me. But moving forward, I'm like, okay, we're going to relearn how to do very basic things. Like you have to hold a baby's neck up or else it just kind of like on the side. So things like that, totally don't know what I'm doing in any way. So yes, very relatable that, especially when people are asking me, like other new moms are like, what are you doing for this? And I'm like, why are you asking me? I Google everything. Like, here's the internet, please enjoy. And so it just blows my mind that any person would think I know anything about anything because I do not. But it just makes me feel good. Like she's alive and that means I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And you must be faking it really well, both because she's alive and if people are asking your opinion. And I'm sure you're doing amazingly. It's just, and it's interesting because you're a book person, but you're looking on the internet because I relate to that because I was like, I don't want to read all the books for many reasons, but it's like a short term, okay, I know the question, I need an answer, I need the most current answer. I'm not flipping through a book right now or looking at an index.
Exactly. It's the currency.
Patience.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, but what was the new information from yesterday? Maybe we could get an article from the literal day before today because things change so fast. And I love books, but by the time they're published, and you all know this, it was written a while ago. Yeah. So that's maybe not the most current. Like, apparently you're not supposed to shake your baby. Not that a book said to do it, but I'm just saying. Noted. Write that one down.
I'm just wondering if the search history of a new mother versus a thriller writer is gross.
Yes.
It's a lot of body fluids. It's a lot of like, what is this symptom? It's a lot of like, is this poisonous?
Right.
It's,
am I going crazy? Will I ever sleep again? Is it normal to hallucinate cockroaches on your wall? Who can say?
Yeah.
Wow, you're making motherhood sound so appealing.
No, it's great though. It's great, guys. No, for real, it's great. My baby's so cute. So like, it's fine.
Your baby is very cute. I will give you that. She's freaking adorable. I love her red little hair. It's so sweet.
Well,
thank you. Yes, she's good.
We certainly can get back to the horrors of motherhood, but I'm also curious about pre-motherhood for you, Chelsea, and also Olivia for you. Like, where has imposter syndrome manifested in any area of your life, past, present, future?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. So like even from childhood, like for me, I grew up super, super poor in a really, really small town, like not the best education system. So even when I got to college, it was like, oh my God, like I don't know anything these people know. And then like it's just continued on through life. And then when I got into corporate work, I actually was like, oh my God, these senior leaders, they all know what's going on. And then as I climbed the ladder, I was like, oh, actually, no one knows what's going on. So it was like, that's actually very comforting to know it's kind of like we're all in the same boat. But yeah, so I mean, it's come up in a million ways. I said earlier, even for the podcast, I reached out to Chelsea, who was so grateful, so gracious to listen to me, suggest this podcast, and I was a nobody. So like, and I was talking to her, and I was like, oh, I feel like an imposter, but it's you just got to drive forward. So there's that, and then in writing. It's huge. It's huge in writing.
So you're working on something right now? Is that?
I am. Yeah. I'm. I just hit the midpoint for my novel that I am currently writing. This is my second novel. First one died in the trenches, which is fine. It's where it lives. And so, so trying again on this one to get an agent. So yeah.
Amazing.
How are you feeling from the first to the second attempt? Are you kind of, do you feel like you've sort of learned things along the way? Is there that experiential thing that sort of, makes you feel a little more confident on round two?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I had like literally no idea what I was doing on the last one, and I pantsed it on top of that.
Mm.
And then I also realized like I didn't really understand what revision was, so I definitely sent it out way before I should not have sent it out. So I learned a lot about that, and then also I was able to I joined ITW and I went to Thriller Fest. My like 6 months after I decided, I was like, I'm gonna write a novel. And then I just signed up for Thriller Fest. And then I went there specifically because I wanted to learn how to write, because I felt like such an imposter, because I was like, I'm writing this. I read a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I know about the craft of writing. So going there was a really huge confidence boost, because I felt like I learned some things. And then I had some external people tell me like, actually, this is pretty good. And I was like, okay, great. Like, that gave me the boost I needed to keep going. But yeah, it's rough out there if you're not like, I don't know how people, you just got to keep going. It is a fake it till you make it.
Yes.
It's like, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned reaching out to Chelsea, who had already established the book club part, right? And
yeah,
what was that like, Chelsea, to get Olivia's like outreach and make the suggestion?
It's funny that she says that, because I'm like, I'm just a random person, just like minding my own business, just like, look, guys, it's a book. Do you like books? I like books. Like, she's like, we should do a podcast, and I'm like, but I don't know anything. Like, about what? I don't have any personality to talk about anything. I don't know anything. And she's like, well, look at these books, and I'm like, yes, books. And so it was just really interesting to me, because I hadn't thought like social media and the book club and everything is just a hobby for me. Like, I started the book club during COVID because there was no book clubs meeting. And then every book club that met in person was like romance or
historical fiction, or literary, like cry books.
And in those places, I cannot fake it till I make it. Like, I cannot sit through that. I'm like, nope. Don't care. Never once cared. Never will care. I'm so sorry. Can't even fake that. So I was like, let's do it thrillers. And so it was kind of just like to connect with people. And I just thought it would be kind of fun. And then it took off, and all these people are like, we also love murder. And I'm like, what? I thought I was the only one. And, kind of went everywhere. So it's just like, again, it's just kind of me sitting back and watching it go. And I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I feel like I'm just like, let me make this group chat, and now we're all together. Like, I don't imagine myself putting in much work or anything like that. So when she was reaching out to me, I was like, what do you want? I don't know. I don't know anything. So it was definitely, reframing the way that I think about it, because Olivia is so like, she has the dreams. So she's like, let's do this and let's do this. She's like so inspiring. And I'm just sitting here like holding my book club in my lap. Like, what do I do? I don't know. Like, look at all these things. And I'm like, okay. So it was really cool to be able to be inspired by someone like that, because for me, I don't think like about that. I'm just kind of like la-di-da skipping down the road. And it was nice to think about potential avenues, including the podcast, and like how we could share with more people. Because that's the reason I wanted to start the book club, because I wanted to meet people that I didn't know that liked the same thing. And then it started only as a virtual book club, because I'm like, I don't know anybody, that it's COVID. Like, I'm not trying to meet new people. And then it came to all these in-person clubs, and that's what makes me the happiest, because I'm like, it's so nice to see people coming together, regardless if they even talk about the book, which sometimes my book club, we talk for like 30 seconds and then we're like, so anyway, back to the drama. But it's just cool to get people together and bond over, like, you find something in common and that's what brings you together, but that's not why you stayed together. And so that's something that's been very rewarding.
Yeah, I would say, Chelsea, you did such an amazing job. I think putting this book club together, I think you found a niche of so many people that have, I think, like both you and I were just like no interest at all in any of these other things. I got enough trauma in my family that I don't need to read that stuff. So I think you did an amazing job. And I can personally say I have started 2 chapters of the Thrillers by the Book Club, the one in Seattle and the one in Phoenix. And it has made such a huge difference. I made an entire friend group in Seattle, and they're strong and they're still going. And now in Phoenix, when I came here, ultimately, like, I've got a good group of people. I'm going to book club tomorrow with the author of the book. We're going to someone's house and he's going to be there, like all of these things. And it's just because you had the forethought of like, maybe I can pull these people together. And that is such a huge thing. And it makes a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I know multiple people who have moved different places and started the book club or joined the book club. And that's how they met their friend group, which is, I mean, you've had life-changing impacts for people. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is.
I mean,
So cool.
it's so hard. It's so hard to make new friends as adults.
Oh my God.
You
How do you do that?
Yeah. And I think, you know, if
turns out that's the answer.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking Greg and I have had some really funny book club experiences, like they've invited us because they've read The Woman Inside or one of our other books. And two in particular stand out that I'm just using this opportunity to reminisce about. But I also want to hear from you guys some funny book club stories. I'm just thinking there was one we did where it was a group of women who had definitely been pre-gaming, like hours.
Yeah.
And we did that one that was virtual.
That was virtual.
And they were toasty.
Yeah.
and I think they were like refilling their drinks like probably 12 times during the like half an hour we were on. And it was great, but pretty unintelligible, like what everyone was saying, except for one person who had a very strong opinion about like one of the main characters and like let us know. It was like as if we had personally offended and hurt this.
Yeah.
So that one
I love that. Like, what are you gonna do? The book is published. It's out. Like, it's done. Why is that helpful?
And then the other one we went on, they were like a book club that really had one author series in particular they loved, or one person in the group loved, and the book club basically became like about another author in another book, and then asking us what we thought of those books.
Yes.
Oh no!
Yes, that's right.
Hope you read them.
So I don't know if you guys have any stories, but I think like book clubs just make for like the best for both for the people who just attend, and then also in the case that they have authors visit, it's so great.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the privilege of hosting a couple of online author book club meetings, and so those have always been really great. But my favorite thing about my book club is actually, this is my first time meeting with an author in person tomorrow, so I'm super excited. It's Curse of the Reaper. We read Curse of the Reaper by Brian McCauley. Yeah, it's so good. It's good horror, like perfect for October. It's really, really good. So that'll be my first time in person. But in my group that I had in Seattle, my favorite thing was I had this one member, her name is Jess, and I'm calling you out, Jess, that would say like, she would rip these books apart, rip them apart. 5 stars. Or it'd be like, she's like, oh, it's 3 stars, and I love this, and I love this, and I love this. And I'm like, I'm so confused by you. And so that was really fun, actually, because it was always like, what's Jess going to come with? Her opinion. And it's also like, as a writer, I was like, what are the things she didn't like? So I know, don't do that.
Yeah. Yes. No, you can learn a lot as a writer hearing from readers, like really talk candidly. No, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So are you guys both actively in your book clubs, your chapters? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And does everyone read the book? Is that like a role, or different people have different approaches?
I think for us, we're still really light on attendance. We're still kind of growing. And I haven't put as much effort into this chapter as I did in Seattle yet. But yeah, typically we have most of the people that have come, we have about 4 of us. We all read the book. We talk about the book for a little bit. I've been doing a better job of trying to find either book club guides to be able to facilitate the conversation, or table topics is like this little square plastic container, and it all has a bunch of cards in it, and it just has different book club questions. They have like table topics you can get for like family night or whatever. Like there's a million of them. And the book club questions one I really like because it helps, because I don't really know what to ask. And sometimes, and Chelsea and I talked about this, I don't remember the books I read. Like unless it is like blew me away, I typically don't remember it, even if I loved it. And so it really helps me, because I'm like, I feel impostery. So I'm here and I'm like, I'm going to lead this book club conversation. I don't remember what this book was about.
Is that
I'm so lucky. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add sort of a follow-up. Is that a sort of a byproduct of just the fact that you were such a volume reader that you're just reading so much that things start to kind of blend together to a certain extent? And then it's all
I think
in
that's
the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's all in the same genre. And then, you know, it never fails that suddenly it'll be a kick where you get like a couple of the same kind of trope happens over and over again. So yeah, that's a big thing of it. And I do read pretty fast. And I have a personal rule that on the podcast, I don't like to talk about anything that's less than a 4-star rating. Like I only do 4 and above, which means I have to read a lot of books to find all of those, because not everyone is in that space. So yeah, that definitely makes a big difference.
I know I don't know how you do that. I'm just like, I cannot. I
know.
I have a lot of books that I like, but I feel like I want people to hear my opinions because that's why they're listening. And all my opinions they're not always 5 stars, you know, like, and everyone, that's the cool thing, is everyone has different opinions. Everyone likes different things, but yeah, Olivia's always like 4 or 5, and I'm like, a range. I think the lowest I did was 2, but it's like 2 to 5 usually. And I know when people come on the podcast, because part of our podcast is talking about a specific book. Each of us speak about a different book, and then we say like what we liked, and things that we think could have been different. And there's people who are like, we don't want to talk about anything negative. Like, we just want to say only positive. We never want to say anything negative. And I love that. I respect that. But I think it's important to hear about, like, for me, like triggers, for example. I like to make sure to bring up like, hey, if you're triggered by this thing and this triggered me, this is something to keep in mind. Or something like that. And so having kind of a wide range of opinions gives people a way to get a good insight into the truth, because that's a big issue I have with social media, is that it's all fake. And so even if it's book reviews, I know people personally who will post 5-star book reviews and then privately be like, I didn't like it. And I'm like, then why? Like,
why'd you post a 5-star review?
Yeah, and you could be like Olivia and say nothing, but why bother?
Yeah, you could just be like me and just, I don't talk about it.
I don't understand. And so it's very important to me to be honest and transparent, because I think that that's what people are asking for and looking for. And it can be very confusing when they're getting all of this specific information and then later are like, wait, hold on, you said that this wasn't a triggering book, and I was very triggered by this one thing. And so I think it's good to be transparent about what a book is actually about, because it has a lot of impact in different ways.
Yeah.
What do you feel like are the motivations for that sort of, you know, disingenuity in reviews and things like that? Is it like, is it that, you know, they know the author? Are they looking for like favorable feedback? Like what pushes those things in your opinion?
I think people are trying to be nice. Yeah. I think people are, you know, and I get that. Of course, I get that. Like, you don't want to, but I do think you can say things in a nice way and just say like, hey, this wasn't for me. But I see some people that post, this wasn't for me, and here's a review where it was for them. And I love that. I love the comparison. But I don't like when I only hear one opinion on anything ever, because that seems it's like when you're on Yelp and you're looking up restaurants and it's all 5 stars. I'm like, that's fake. If it has to have a good restaurant is 4 stars. If it has 5 stars, I don't believe it, because there's no criticism. That's not reality. And so I trust a 4-star implicitly. A 5-star, I'm like, not going there. So I think that shows a real human reaction, and human reactions, if a book makes you feel something negative, it still makes you feel something. It's not apathetic. It's not forgettable. It's not unimportant. You felt something and you're responding to it. And I think that that's something to take into account, where sometimes people are just like, well, it wasn't, you know, it's not this perfect 5-star book. And I'm like, but what did it really make you feel? What did it make you think? How did the themes in this book connect with you? And they're just like, oh, you know, it's a book. And I'm like, I like to see like a review that gives me a comprehensive overview of like, because readers spend a long time reading. Like, even a fast reader, you're investing time, you're investing money, you're investing when you could be doing anything else. And so I think it's good to see, hey, this is a honest reaction about something that will give me more information moving forward if I want to pick it up or not.
It's like you're kind of...
I think that's super important. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, really, it just sounds like you're trying to do your best to respect their time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I agree. Like in my personal life, I definitely talk more openly about criticisms of books, but I'm also walking this fine line that Chelsea is a reviewer and she has no intention of wanting to become an author. My goal is to become an author and have these authors be my colleagues.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to feel like I have to walk this very fine line of being honest to our audience and not being offensive or critical when I'm trying to make these people like I want to be like coworkers with you. So for me, that's why I have this rule, is specifically because I want to be authentic, but like it's just like it's such a fine line. And I think for people who are in that space, because there are people who started out as bookstagrammers, then wanted to go into or intending to write, like Bradley Godfrey, I think is her name. Yeah. So she was like, she's got a couple books out now. She was majoring in bookstagrammer. And I just think it's like, it's just because as authors, right, we're supposed to have a platform. That's a whole separate thing. So we're like, it kind of all blurs really weirdly at some point. But I do think it's super important to be authentic. And so I know like last year, I think for Halloween, the book that I reviewed there, I didn't like it, but I did review it. And it was like, here, I think other people are going to love it. Like it was beautifully written. It definitely was like, people are going to love this book. Not for me. But it's just like, I think there's a lot of walking a tightrope.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, right. You don't want to get stuck at like a Thriller Fest cocktail party talking to someone and then they realize
oh my God. What if I was like, oh my God, Greg Wands' book was so bad. And oh shoot, he's here talking to me. Awkward. Like, no.
No, I mean, even if you don't want to be political, you do have to be to an extent. Publishing is a business, being an author is a business, and then equally being a reviewer is a business. So you have to kind of honor, like your own boundaries within that business. But I'm curious because you guys coming from different perspectives, but both like clearly love and revere books and thrillers in particular. Like, what makes a really good thriller, in your opinion? Like, what is a 4 or 5 star book? Like, specific or generally?
Well, for me, I don't want to know where it's going. Like, a good book for me is non-predictable. And even if it's not, it doesn't have to be a big twist, but I like to be surprised while reading. And it does not even have to be at the end. But, it's enjoyable to me to, if I think I could have written the book, I don't like it. If I think that this is, the plotting or even just the way the story goes takes me by surprise, I love that. Because I don't want to say, that's my issue with romance books, right? They mostly always end up together. So I don't want to read that. I don't want to read a story with a conflict arc and then they live happily ever after. I want to read a story that has different things in it that are going to take me off guard. So maybe it's a theme, maybe it's a character, maybe it's a backstory, whatever it is. I like to be surprised and I like to be caught off guard. I can't remember the book, but we talked about it on the podcast. There was a book we both read that had a pregnant detective who was 9 months pregnant. And that was such a random character.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Do you remember that? It was so cool though, because it was a different type of character that you don't see in every book. I really liked something different. And I mean, it's hard, right? Every book has already been written, but not really. And so I think that's, if you can find a way to make it a little bit different, even if it's just a character trait, I find that interesting. Instead of it just being hometown girl meets handsome guy who cuts logs in the Christmas tree shop and then has financial problems, but she does a bake sale and they end up together type of story.
Chelsea does not like Hallmark.
No.
So.
Right. I really like a twist. And then also for me, I like an unreliable narrator because that leads to the best possible twists. I know some people don't like that, but for me, in a way, it's a cheat in a good way, because I'm like, I don't trust you. You're straight up lying to me as the narrator. And I love it. Like, please mislead me, because I don't want to see where this is going. I want to be surprised. Give me that time jump. Give me that, oh, this actually happened 10 years ago and now we're living the results. Like, oh, love it. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I'm a plot lover. Like, I'm about the plot, and the twists are and being surprised are huge. I know there's a lot of folks that are like really love, like, they're character driven and that's what they enjoy, and I appreciate that. But I am like, I love the action. I love the stuff that's going on. Like, we're running from a serial killer, and then like, how are we gonna get away from the serial killer? Like, Scream is my favorite horror movie, so kind of gives like, so I'm really into that. And just like a really interesting propulsive plot. If it's something that can suck me in and I can't stop because like I have to know what's going to happen next, that's the hallmark of a really good thriller, which is very interesting. On the other side, it's real hard to do. So I have such a different respect for authors trying to become one of like, I don't know how you did that, but okay.
Yeah, I was thinking when you just said what I was thinking, which was, now that you've gone through like the Looking Glass, how has that changed? Because your standard is already very high for a book, probably higher than someone just coming in saying, oh, I have a good book idea, I'm going to start to write it. You're going to be comparing your writing probably subconsciously to every book you've read that you've really loved. So how do you either integrate that pressure, and does it motivate you and help you, or do you have to tune it out?
So I've gone back and forth about this a lot. Like, while I'm writing, do I want to read thrillers while I'm writing? Is that going to influence me or whatever? And I found that I do need to continue to be immersed in that world. So for me, what has happened is that a lot of times when I have a physical book, ebook, whatever, I start analyzing the prose, or like, oh, that's show, don't tell. Like, because I'm in such a learning state, I'm literally analyzing the book and not reading the book. So what I've started to do is I mostly do audiobooks. And so I'm able to lose myself in the story and then enjoy it from that perspective. And if it's a really good book, then I want to go back and actually like look at it and, okay, like, how does this happen or whatever. JT Ellison is somebody I do that with a lot. Like, I have to wait until it's audiobook because I can't read the book because I'm so busy analyzing how amazing her writing is. So yeah, it's just very interesting. And also because now I'm like, oh, that's a clue. That's a clue. That's a clue. And it happens when you read a ton, but when you're also writing it, you're seeing like, okay, is that a MacGuffin, or is that like for real? Those kind of things. So,
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, what you're talking about, going from being a reader to being an author, where like now you're thinking of the mechanics of it, right? You're thinking like how the sausage is made, so to speak, as opposed to just being sort of like a not quite passive enjoyer of it, but in a way, you're not thinking about the kind of the business of it. You're not thinking about all of the logistical stuff. And that got me wondering kind of what we were talking about earlier in the conversation. I wonder how much for creatives such as ourselves, book lovers, people who are immersed in this kind of thing, how much that maybe contributes itself to this idea of imposter syndrome, in that, Chelsea, as you said, it's like you're doing this kind of work, but doesn't really feel like work. Right. And ultimately, I think reading, writing, all of those things ideally don't really feel like work. And so I wonder if being in that system where you're doing something that's just a passion thing that you've somehow managed to make into this endeavor kind of doesn't feel like a traditional career or a traditional, work hour set thing, how much that just sort of like changes your headspace around it as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thinking about how it's just, the whole thing has just been very eye-opening. And one of the things that Chelsea and I have talked about a lot on the podcast is exploring how books have come to fruition. Yeah. When I started writing, I was just, because I like just randomly was like, I'm going to write a book. So that's what I started doing. And now it's my entire life. And but I didn't know anything about public. Like, I didn't understand how do you create something from nothing and it gets into my hands and then it's like on a screen? Like, how did all of this happen? And so one of the things we look at on the podcast, we talk to people in the industry because it's super important to us to like, it's important to me, I will say, and I think Chelsea as well, but that people understand what it takes for a book to get into their hands. So there's just like, I think there comes a different level of respect for what it takes to write a book. And it takes to get a book published through a traditional publisher and all of that kind of stuff. I think for me, that's been the biggest eye opener of the switch, has just been understanding how it went from nothing to something, and all the hoops that authors have to go through in order to get to us. And so I think that's another reason why I just don't like giving lower reviews, because I know what you had to go through. This is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Right. And so just as I don't know.
Well, that empathy makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really helpful we were talking, I think before we started recording, that kind of that knowledge can help, but also hinder the creative process, because then you start to have all that kind of, head trash about, is this going to be sellable, marketable? Are people going to want this? Will it be the next, fill in the blank book club pick, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious, Chelsea, from your point of view, since you aren't a writer, but you obviously know a lot about the business, does that change your opinions or lead you in a certain direction when you're like picking books that you want to read and talk about?
It does. I think something that I've realized is that because of how long it takes from writing a book to getting it published, which I had no idea about, I'm so impressed that there are so many books like that are timely. That is amazing to me. Like, that's something I've realized, like, wow, how are these books so timely, so poignant, and they're coming out at the right time? If someone wrote this like 2 years ago, that blows my mind. I'm like constantly impressed by that. Even like when a bunch of books about one topic comes out all at once, I'm like, what? They didn't
like
just
this year
write
was game shows. All game shows. We had tons of those books, right? Like, how did that happen? They all came out at like, what? How is everybody thinking the same thing? Right. It's so amazing.
Exactly. And so for me, when I'm looking at choosing what book I want to have for the book club, and I don't require all the clubs to do the same book, but I just say my opinion and I say, like, this is what we're choosing, and if you want to stick with it, that's cool, and if not, that's cool. I like a book that may have differing opinions for my readers. So I think it's a failure if everyone thinks it's 5 stars. That I don't prefer that. I would like people to have an opinion. And I mean, if it's some people having a negative opinion, I'm fine with that. But really, it's just to start a conversation. So what about this book can we talk about? And like, what did I take from it? And how will I be able to discuss it with people? Because then it goes to, like Olivia was saying, sometimes it can be hard to come up with topics at book club. But for me, it's not, because I pick every single one of these books for a reason. Like, it's not just on a whim randomly. It's because there's something about this book that I resonate with and want to talk about and feel a connection to in my own life. And I think other people will have a connection to as well. So I make sure to read every book before I choose it, because I'm not trying to choose just any book has nothing that I can discuss, because I want to make sure that it has something that I can discuss. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm choosing. But knowing the process definitely does add a lot into my thinking, because it's not just something someone threw together a year, a month, a week ago. It's a long process. So another thing about that me and Olivia have talked a lot about marketing. So when a book is marketed incorrectly, that is like,
it's the kiss of death. If publishers market a suspense as a thriller, I've seen it happen time and again. It is not a thriller. People get pissed. They're not going to read it. That language is so important
and
to
so
readers.
That's also something I look at. Like, I'll read the back and then I'll read the book, and if they don't match up, I already know the reaction of ire. And so it's just like, just little things like that, though. Like, you never realize how much these things matter until I'm experiencing it as a reader, and I see myself not liking a book because I thought it was something that it wasn't. And so just a lot of little things like that go into kind of thinking about what I want to choose.
Yeah. Well, it sounds...
Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you are very conscientious about that decision-making process, and having that, going in with that mindset of wanting to have a book that will maybe, provoke conversation and won't just be uniformly loved. Have you found coming out of that, that has sparked really interesting kind of, substantial conversations? Have you had that experience?
Yeah. For my in-person chapter, especially, like the virtual club, to be honest, it's very hard to manage because sometimes there's hundreds of people in that chat.
Right.
So with that one, we don't get as deep because it's so many people. But my in-person club, absolutely. We've had talks about so many real issues about social justice and about like specific triggers from a book and how it relates to people and their real lives and the reaction that somebody has to a book and why they have this reaction and what it ties to for them personally and things like that. So you get to know the people in your book club at a different level when you're bringing in things that have different topics that you may not have explored just in a regular conversation.
I'm really interested in the topic about mismarketed books in, thriller, suspense, mystery, domestic thriller. There's, the kind of big umbrella categorizations and then the sub, but, without, if you want to, but we don't have to talk specific titles. I'm wondering kind of like from the back end, like, is that debut authors who feel like they don't have enough agency to say like, you're mismarketing my book? Is it, people not knowing the nuances of the differences between suspense and thriller? Is it, agents weren't able to like win that fight? I mean, these could be rhetorical questions too. It's just, it hadn't occurred to me, but now that you say it, I have read some books in the past and been like, this isn't what I thought it was. And realized why it wasn't what I thought it was, because it was mismarketed.
I think it depends how it's mismarketed. So sometimes it seems intentional, right? So I'm going to see a book and it literally says the next Gone Girl. Like, stop comparing things to Gone Girl, first of all.
No.
I'm done. It's over. Like, I'm done with it. And then don't try to market something that to me because you know what I'm going to think it is. And then it's not that way. And so in those type of situations, it feels purposeful. It feels like I'm going to get a certain group of people to get really excited about this book by marketing it this way. But if it's not that way, it's not going to have the results they want.
Right.
And then there's other books that are marketed in certain ways where it's a spoiler, right? So I'll read the back and it will say the plot. It'll say an unreliable narrator, and that kind of ruins the whole book. Yeah. And so what was it, Olivia? Recently I read a book. Oh my goodness. I'm going to need to look it up, but it literally, the main like surprise of the book was on the back or in the title where I was like,
oh yeah. I remember you say, oh, wasn't it? Oh God, what was that? Yeah. I know what you're talking about though.
I need to look it up because I still to this day am so mad because I'm like, this could.
I think it's the Vampires Club or whatever, right? Like from Grady Hendrix, because it's like a whole thing like halfway through the book and then suddenly you find out they're vampires. Like it's in the title.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. So this is spoilers for anybody out there listening.
Sorry, spoilers.
Yes, this is going to be a spoiler, but let me just quickly rage. It was a Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Awesome title. You don't know they're vampires until like 50% into the book. So, I mean, you don't know. It's in the title! And they're like, oh my gosh, they're vampires. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's called. It has the word vampires in the title. I'm not shocked. I'm not impressed. I'm not excited. I was mad. I like that book, but I was like, don't give me like this reveal. It's in the literal title. I'm so mad about it. Like, there's been multiple books like that where on the back it's like, and then this thing happens, and I'm like, don't tell me this thing happens. This is the thing that I'm not supposed to know as a reader. Like, so mismarketing can kill a book. A title can kill a book. The little teeny paragraph on the back will kill a book, because it's like, as a reader, I only have so much time to read what is this book going to be about? Okay, let me quickly go over it. I don't want to know the plot. I don't want to know the big twist. Please do not give that to me. Like, just give me an idea of what it's going to be about. And it's just like, it makes me rage, because I think this can't possibly be it. There has to be so much more in this book. And then I read it, and it literally, I'm like, I could have read one paragraph and I got the whole book.
Wow.
Wow. So yeah, I feel like there's definitely, that's one way, like, and the intentional kind of mismarketing, or just like whatever that might be. And then what happens, right, is that readers don't know that it was the publishers that made those decisions. They don't know it's the marketers that made these decisions, who oftentimes come up with the titles. They are the ones who change the titles from whatever the author might originally have, those kind of things. Or an author may, like, I have a friend of mine who has several books out. They're wonderful suspense novels. They're marketed as thrillers, and people get upset when they read them because they're not thrillers. And I've talked with this person like a million times, and they just, no matter what they did, the publisher just wouldn't change that language. So it's very interesting when you start kind of diving into reader expectations and the marketing piece, and how that impacts what readers' expectations are, particularly in this genre, because we're really looking for the mystery, the thrill, the surprise, whatever those things are, that are really unique to the genre. The readers' expectations are so high that a mismarket just hurts the author, which is so unfortunate, because it's not, most of the time it's not their fault.
Right.
Anyway,
and also,
we could go off on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Well, also with thrillers, because we're, thrillers are so twist based and so surprise based and red herrings and all of these things that we have to kind of like work in as the mechanics of the story. Language is so so crucial, right? The specificity of language is so crucial. I'm always impressed. Chelsea, you earlier mentioned trigger warnings, right? One of the things that has impressed me so much is Ashley Winstead. In the front of her book, she lists trigger warnings. And anytime I open it, I think to myself, I'm like, that's such a tightrope walk to have all of these things and be super conscientious. And she always delivers incredible books. And I'm always thinking to myself, it's like, how do you thread the needle of presenting the trigger warnings and all that up front, when that could very easily be a spoiler alert right off the bat?
We've talked about that a lot too. We have that on the podcast. We've had people like saying that too, of like, oh, if you're talking about the triggers, it's the spoiler. Right. And so it's really hard to figure out, how do you talk about it? And especially if you're trying to market it, right? You're like trying to, it's the hook, right? Like, ooh, that's the exciting thing that happens. It's rough. I don't envy their jobs. I'm just saying, I don't envy their jobs.
Well, what attracts you guys to debuts that you don't know anything about the author? They're not repeat buys. Like, is it cover? Is it title? All of the above?
For me, it's the synopsis. It's not, I don't care about a cover. I don't care about a title, but I want to hear what the book is. And that's why marketing is so important. Because when I pick up a new book, I know what I like already. And so when I'm hearing a specific synopsis and I'm like, that sounds good, I'll pick it up. It doesn't matter. I don't care about the author. Like, there are some authors I'm going to read because I love them and I know they've proven it. But at some point, everyone has been a new author to me at some point in my life. And so I think the plot is very important. And for me, it's also if there's something I could resonate with. Like, there's this series, it's the Inland Empire series by Anne Fraser. And I live in the Inland Empire in California. So like that one, I'm like, that's really cool to feel like I'm reading about where I live, or things like that. Well, if it's a debut and I feel personally connected to it, I'll pick it up. But mainly the plot, if the plot catches my attention, it has to, for a debut, that matters the most is how it's written, because it needs to catch my attention when it may not have otherwise.
Yeah.
I think especially something to consider as a reviewer, and the reviewers on Bookstagram and Booktube and YouTube and stuff, they're sent so many books that, it's definitely hard for debut authors or self-published or indie authors to get their attention sometimes. But I think that's just something I just wanted to mention, is like there's the other side of it where I know authors are like, well, what's the secret? How do I get you to pick up my book? Well, there's not really it's about, the secret is the synopsis. It's what's the story, what is the plot about, and just how does that relate to our own personal interests. Like for me, like I will pick up a serial killer book every single time. It doesn't matter who wrote it. I will pick it up every time. And then, but there's other stuff I'm a little bit like, I don't know. The other thing for me though too is I like to look at debuts. So when we do pub day, that's a segment that we have on our show where I actually do research and I find out like what's coming out that week, and we talk about the books that are coming out that are different than the ones that we're highlighting, or even different than the one that the author is a guest on, because it's important to give more information that's out there. And then I know that there's a lot of marketing goes towards your established authors or like your really hot new debut, and it doesn't go towards like these middle levels. So a lot of times our pub day segment, I'm looking at that middle level, like maybe they're not getting quite as much of attention. And I try to pick a diverse group of authors, between gender, race, style, type of book, all of these things. I'm really trying to look and be really broad about what we're looking at. But I will more often lean towards a debut than an established. If I have the two and I only have so much space, I will do the debut. Just because to me it's their shot. Everyone deserves a shot.
But I will say, like, approach matters. So for me personally, a lot of people reach out to me about their book on Instagram. Like, a lot. So many. And so I see kind of the gamut of messages from like, read this and a link. Or like, do you want to read my book, with no plot? I don't know what it's about. I've never heard of them. They don't follow me, which I'll just tell you right there, if you're going to reach out to someone and you don't follow them, they're not going to read your book. Like, especially when people are like, I love your page and I want you to read my book. And I'm like, you don't even follow me. Like, it comes across as very disingenuous. And I think readers, especially with a bigger social media platform, can see that, right? Like, we know when it's disingenuous and you're like, oh, I see that you have this many followers, please promote my book. Like that, I understand it. And there are many people that I'm like, I would love to read this book, because they reach out very like professionally, and like they understand that I'm not just like this profession, like I'm not like, I'm giving up my time for this. I'm not just like, hey, read this, like some people are like, hey, I'd love if you checked out my book. I think you would like it because this. Here's a copy of what it's about. I'd love to send it to you. Totally fine. Like, or I noticed that you like this book and my book has these similar things, so you may like it. Great. So it's just the way you approach it too. And most of the time I would say it's a debut. And you can tell because it's inexperience as well. But part of me wants to be like, hey, can I give you some advice? Like, please don't approach people this way, because you're not going to get the and I know it's a lot of work to like cold call in a way. People, I understand that's putting yourself out there. And so I feel for them, but I'm like, there's ways to do it where you're not accosting me aggressively about, and then when I respond being like, well, like a mad response, I'm just like, I always want to read a book. I would love to read your book. But if I say like, hey, I don't really like paranormal, whatever, and they're like, well, just read it. I'm like, I don't think that you're going to get the review that you want. And I'm trying to give you my honest opinion about that up front. So I just
ahead of time. Don't bother. Like, save your arc. Give it to somebody else. That's going to be your readership.
That will love it. And it's just, maybe if it's not for me, like I try to say that, but I think there's different ways in approaching it, because some people are very aggressive.
Well, two things come to mind. Like, the first one is, if you're going to like send a shitty reply because you didn't get the response you wanted, you're not going to get anything you want in life. Right. Like, move along. Right. And then the second thing is what you're saying really, I think, applies also to how authors approach agents even before they get to the point of publication. And I know this from working with like clients when I do like book coaching or ghostwriting or editing. It's like, if you want to have someone represent your work, whether it be as an agent or as an editor or as a reviewer, like, you need to show that you respect and understand what this person's personal tastes are.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I always say, if you want to find agents that you think would be good for you, go and read books that agents have repped that you love, and then refer to those books when you're querying agents, because I think this is where writers really fall short, is they just want to kind of like get to the end game. You know, it's like, oh, you have a platform that has lots of followers, so you should read my book.
Yeah.
You know, and it's unfortunate, because I think people are really like missing opportunities, you know, where
it's like you're saying, you put in 1% effort to show what interests you. Like, why do you think I'll like this book? Like, it doesn't take a lot, you know, like look at the last 2 posts and say what you think I'll like. And if you don't think it, don't reach out to someone. If you think that, like, I'm like, a lot of people will say, like, read my new romance book, and I'm like, I don't think you've looked at my page before.
Like 100%. That is a no. She does not do romance. Like, it is no.
Look at my page, and they're just like, no, but you'd really like it. And I'm like, I promise you I wouldn't, and it's not personal. Like, it's not personal. It's not you. It could be literally The Notebook, and I would be like, what? And it's not you. It's me. But yeah, it's just, I think it takes a slight effort and a little bit of like research, and has big outcomes, because when someone champions your book, I have seen the difference. Like, when there's a book I love and I'm passionate about, I can get people super excited about it, and I see like the way it spreads, and that's awesome. And you want to find a champion. You want to find someone that can get excited about your book regardless of social media. It's about the excitement and the genuine like love for what you're writing.
Yeah, I think it really is that kind of sweet spot for, especially for young authors, for aspiring authors, debut authors, of, you know, it doesn't come naturally. I think there's that whole left brain, right brain thing, right? It's, you know, the business side doesn't come naturally to creatives. It's the creative work, but you also do have to be practical in a sense, and you have to be, to your points earlier, specificity is key. You know, find the right people to get your book to. Don't look at it as the scattershot approach, you know, as specific as you can be. I think that's, you know, from the reviewers to the bookstagrammers to the agent to the editor, all the way up and down the line. It's, you know, it can only help. I think that approach.
Yeah. Well, and you guys have me really thinking about like the concept of synopsis and like jacket copy and art copy and how important it is. And my new kind of favorite thing on social media is when authors share their query letters, because I'm so curious in how they.
I want to know who's sharing them. I want to read them.
I have links. Yeah, and Lauren Ling Brown, the author of Society of Lies, just shared hers on Instagram, and we just had her on the show. And I think, you know, what the author started with is the concept. And look, we know books change from the point of querying an agent to when it finally is on the shelves. But I think in most cases, like at least the soul of it is there, the kernel. And I wonder if there's a way, because it's like you're talking about like trusting in the readers, that they're going to connect with the book that you wrote, and like tying those two things together, like the author's perception of what the book is and what the reader experience will be. Because it sounds like somewhere in the middle, with the publishing copy and the marketing and all of the business of it, it gets misfiled. And I also just love seeing like from query to book on the shelf, like,
oh my gosh, yeah,
at, you know, distances. So yeah, there are some authors who are doing it, and I totally encourage other authors to like let your query letters out, because it's so helpful to new authors.
Yeah.
You mentioned really Lauren Ling Brown. Her book was a debut, right?
Yes.
The Society of Lies. Yeah. She was one person I distinctly remember, because I didn't know she was a debut. I hadn't heard of her. She reached out to me on Instagram about her book in the nicest way. I remember her specifically being like the way she reached out about her book and the way she pitched it. I was like, I'm so excited. I'm going to read this book right now. And it was the next book I read, and I loved it.
Right.
And that just mentioning it made me remember, like, that stuff sticks with you. Like, she was like, you liked this book, so you're going to like this book. And this is what I wrote. And so good, too. Like, she's definitely
incredible.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh my God, you guys, this was the fastest hour, I think, on record.
I'm like, I have so, we didn't even talk about real life. I have a whole list, right?
Wait, we haven't even done the podcast yet, right? We just started.
This is all just the warm up. And record.
Just the warm up.
Well, we don't, obviously, we're going to have to do a part 2, but just in like our final couple of minutes, is there anything about like the imposter syndrome or the imposter character that like you wanted to make sure we talked about because we value your insights so much? So
I think for me, so I love to listen to like little motivational clips from celebrities like my Denzel Washington and Jennifer Lopez and Beyonce and stuff like that. It just really helps me. But the one that sticks to me is one that Jennifer Lopez says like, just do it. Don't be afraid. Fuck it. Do it afraid. And that is how I try to combat my imposter syndrome is like, I am afraid. The imposter syndrome to me comes from insecurity and wanting to be perfect and all of these things, right? Like there's all the psychological we could have therapy sessions about, but but to me it's that like just do it anyway, and just to Chelsea's point, fake it till you make it. Like that's the only way I know to get over it is to just go through it and realize, oh, actually it's not as bad as I think it is.
It also goes with that. I mean, I don't know what book it was, but about doing, 10,000 hours of something to get good at it. Yeah, like that is very true. I could talk forever about this, really. I didn't even talk about all my imposter syndrome, but like the practice makes you feel comfortable no matter what it is. If you do something enough, like Olivia said, even if you're scared, even if you're uncomfortable, just do it. Just keep doing it over and over and over. And you have no choice but to get better. You have no choice. There's no way that you're going to stay the same. You will get better. And I know that from my own life. I know that from seeing it. I know it from research. Like practice really makes perfect. Like even if you started at a 0, you can go from a 0 to a 1 and then a 1 to a 2, and you're going to improve. And so just doing the motions has results. And so go through those motions and you will see results, guaranteed.
Ooh, I love that is, we have to leave off on this right now because you guys you were both amazing and we had such a good time, and we will do a part 2, but how can people connect with you on social who may not be connected already?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Thriller Book Babe. This is like our sign off for.
I know, it's like the end of our show. We haven't done this in a while.
Thriller Book Babe on Instagram.
Amazing.
And the podcast at Thrillers by the Book Club Pod on Instagram. You can also find me at Olivia Day Wallace.
Amazing.
Or the book club at Thrillers by the Book Club.
Or the book club at Thrillers by the Book Club. Like you can find us, basically we're on Instagram. That's where you find us.
And Olivia, no pressure, but we'll have you on when your book is out.
Yay! So this is very fun. Thank you so much for having us. And I love when we get to be the rare guests. Like we usually always have the guests, so it's super fun being on the other side.
We love turning the tables.
Indeed.
All right. Well, Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Harrogate, and Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Luoma designed our logo.
You can find us on IG at Imposter Hour Podcast and online at imposterhour.com. Thanks for joining.